Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, and happy Halloween! And welcome back to Scallop Storytime as we continue our foray into the fanfiction published into canon, Long Live the Pumpkin Queen. Last time we received the twist of the story that Sally is in fact the daughter of the governor of Dreamtown, and I totally didn't see that coming at all. Sally seems to be quite slow on the uptake, so let us continue with that. Chapter 12. I wake in a bed, white cotton sheets, autumn clouds painted in the thin brush strokes in the ceiling above me. The room smells of lilacs and dusty, unused spools of thread, fabric folded and forgotten, left to the moths. I sit up, and my head wobbles. The words find me again, the ones that sent my mind tumbling, that made the room teeter and turned everything suddenly dark. We're your parents. The same tipsy, inside-out and upside-down dizziness washes over me now, remembering the way she looked at me, like she knew me, like I was hers and she was mine, like we belonged together in some faraway, forgotten past, in a dream, perhaps, at a time that was never quite real. Yet when she looked at me and spoke those words, some part of me wanted to believe her. I shake my head and survey the room. It's a perfectly square bedroom, except for a half-moon sitting nook with windows overlooking the semi-dark town. Still not quite night, not quite day. A nightlight glows near the door, shimmering an amber warmth, and a jewelry box sits on a dresser near a closet, and in some distant cobwebbed corner of my mind, I can picture a tiny doll inside, a yellow tutu ballerina that twirls on a pedestal, and a metallic tune that plays when the lid is opened. It feels like a memory, like I've seen this box before, known it, touched it. I shake my head, clearing away the crowded thought. Someone spent a childhood in this room, read books in the half-moon nook, made wishes on pale starlight, and danced finger puppet figures along the wall, slept and dreamed and felt snug in their bed when someone who loved them tucked them in at night. But it certainly wasn't me. And yet, still, the room feels far away familiar, wrongly familiar, and also somehow impossibly right. A gentle knock raps against the bedroom door, and then it cracks open. Greta, the woman who touched my face with her soft fingertips, pokes her head through the opening. "Sally?" she asks quietly, carefully. "Are you awake?" "Yes," I answer, my voice a childlike whisper in my throat, caught and strangled. She steps into the room, hands rubbing together, eyes half-moon-lidded, and she stares at me as if I might only be a dream, a thing she has wished for but can't possibly be real. I think we gave you quite a shock," she says nervously, casting her eyes away, like she doesn't know where to direct her gaze, like I will vanish if she looks at me for too long. Merely a bit of morning mist hovering above a swamp, something that will break apart when sunlight reaches me. "But you have given us quite a shock, too, appearing after all these years." I swing my legs over the edge of the bed, my head still seesawing. "How is it—" I stop myself, start again. "I don't understand." I shake my head and look up at Greta, searching the seams of her face. "I'm afraid you can't be my parents," I tell her. It's impossible. A story that's surely all jumbled up and spit out wrong. She blows out a long exhale, as if she's been holding her breath for far too long. Years, decades maybe. And now she can finally breathe. For half a moment, I think she's going to sit on the edge of the bed beside me, touch her hand to my face again like she did in the other room. But she seems to stop herself, her eyes finding me instead. "You were young when you disappeared," she begins, unearthing a story I suspect she hasn't told in a very long time. "Only 12, a few days after your birthday, actually." She pauses. "You were taken straight from this room, right out through the window." She walks to the windows where a single candle burns brightly, yellow wax dripping down to the windowsill, her face reflecting back in the glass. uneven seams and long cherry red hair, just like my own. But I never had a family, I tell her, shaking my head, still feeling unmoored, like I might tip back to the floor if I tried to stand. I wasn't born, I was created, built by a scientist named Dr. Finkelstein in a lab. He invented me. Greta turns to face me. Our butler, Edwin, saw a pale-skinned man steal you away into the forest that night. The man had small pebble eyes and an oversized head. Is this your Dr. Finkelstein? My mouth flattens. Maybe, I think. Was he in a wheelchair? I ask. She frowns, then shakes her head. I don't think so. My mind races. It sounds like Dr. Finkelstein, but could it be that he wasn't in a wheelchair? Was he younger then, still able to walk, to sneak into another realm and steal a girl from her room, straight from her room? Could Greta's story be true? We tried to look for you. We did, she continues. But the doorways at the grove of trees, the doors to the other towns, were blocked on the other side. We couldn't pass through them. Our town is old, mostly forgotten, and our doorways in the other worlds have been overgrown, lost. She swallows, crossing her arms. I never saw you again after that night. A trail of tears leaks from her eyes, staining her cheekbones. I remember when I found the door to Dreamtown, how there had been overgrown vines tangled across the doorway. Maybe the door had been blocked on purpose by Dr. Finkelstein. Maybe he wanted to make sure the door was never found, and ensure that no one from Dreamtown ever slipped through. Maybe some part of Greta's story was true. She walks to the window, gazing past the curtain, then lifts up something from the windowsill, turning it in her hand. A glass mason jar, empty. Do you remember this? She asks, a small cork at the side of her mouth, a memory. I shake my head. It's the jar where you used to put all of your angers and sads. Your sads! I feel my eyebrows lift, my leaves crinkling, too many questions clouding my mind. When you were little, she says, whenever you were angry or sad about something, you'd whisper it into this jar, then seal the lid tight. She's smiling fully now, placing the jar back on the windowsill. You always felt better afterward. I like the way she looks in the window, muted, pale light across her stitched skin, and I want to believe her words, believe these stories of a childhood I might have had, but none of it feels quite right, quite like my life. I don't remember any of that, I answer, scanning the bedroom, looking for anything familiar to remind me of who I might have once been. But only the jewelry box flickers in my mind, something that might have belonged to me once. If I was 12 when I was taken, I wouldn't remember it at all, wouldn't I? I would remember it all, wouldn't I? At last, Greta comes to sit on the edge of the bed beside me, and the closeness of her is an odd comfort, maybe even familiar. Maybe she is the thing I remembered, my mind tugging me back to this room, to her. I don't know, she answers plainly. I don't know why some memories are lost and others stick like mud inside us. But I remember holding you when you were only a day old. You were so small, your patchwork seems so new and unbroken. Albert kept telling me I needed to let you sleep on your own, in your own crib, in your own room. But I couldn't bear it. I slept with you beside me every night for that first year. I named you Sally after my own grandmother, a woman who had your wide, wide eyes and who laughed like an owl hooting from the treetops. At this, she smiles, a tenderness in her eyes, lashes dipped low. I touch a hand to the stitching along my chest bone. Ugh! A peculiar ache fluttering inside me that almost feels like a memory, solid and real. I don't understand. I shake my head, my chest heavy again, the room tipping a little to the left, then right, before I blink and it centers itself. I was made in a lab, I mutter. An experiment. Nothing more. No, she answers, placing her hand over mine, her voice like a cool winter breeze, as if she could undo what's already been done. You used to follow me out into the garden. She nods her head, as though the memory was just as clear as if it happened yesterday. crawling through the rain-wet soil, pulling up tulip bulbs, and chewing on nightshade carrots when you were teething. We baked crescent moon cookies before bedtime, and I taught you how to sew when you were only 2 years old. You took to it quickly, always so precise with a needle and thread. You were mending your own seams before you could even walk. I want to believe her story, that I was a girl with an ordinary childhood, sucking my fabric thumb and learning to walk, and kissed on the forehead by parents who loved me more than anything. A girl who was wanted, a girl who was missed. Tears begin to break against my eyes, and I can't hold them back. Greta pulls me into her arms, and the scent of her, of lilac linens and warm chamomile honey tea, is like sinking into a warm summery dream, like a memory, a tickle in my nose. Even this room, the soft midnight colors, the curve of the mattress beneath me where a girl once slept, feels abnormally, unexpectedly like my own. The shape of me, carved into the fibers of this bed, a room that remembers me. Scratched into the fabric of my skull is a word I can hear, that echoes and grows louder the more I focus on it. Home. Maybe this was my room. My life. One I'm afraid to let myself believe might be true. Another thought occurs to me. Perhaps I don't remember this life because Dr. Finkelstein made sure I wouldn't. The endless collection of herbs and potions and foul-smelling chemicals stored in his lab, countless books on all manner of dark things. Perhaps he plucked me from this room, stole me away to Halloween Town, then poisoned me and made me forget. Maybe made me think I was simply a creation, a diagram on a lab wall brought to life by electrodes and wires. Not a girl born to parents in a world made of dreams. All this time I have believed an awful, wretched, unforgivable lie, but why would Dr. Finkelstein take me away? I pulled myself away from Greta, who might be my mother, and in her eyes I try to see myself. A faraway past I had forgotten, but there is too much noise in my skull, threads knotted and frayed. A moment later, Albert appears in the doorway, knocking quietly and carrying a cup of steaming tea. "It's wild mint," he says, stepping tentatively into the room, as if it's a place he hasn't been in some time. A room filled with the ghost of the daughter he lost. "You loved mint tea when you were little," he adds, placing the cup on the bedside table. I smile up at him. "Thank you." Greta wipes the tears from her cheeks. "You found your way back to us," she says softly. Albert touches her shoulder, and there are tears in his eyes, too. 1,000 sleepless nights when he thought he'd never see his daughter again, when he believed I was lost for good. We have so much time to make up," Greta says, her cheeks lifting, a warm surfacing in her eyes. So many things to discuss. But hearing her say the word time sends a spark like a knife through my chest, because I'm certain I already wasted too much of it. "I came here because something bad has happened to Halloween Town," I say quickly, needing to tell her everything, needing them to understand. "Everyone is asleep, in all of the holiday towns, and it's my fault." I swallowed down the painful sob catching in the back of my throat. The panic finding me again, even in the quiet of this room. "I need your help waking everyone up. Waking everyone up. I need you to help stop the Sandman." The seams along Greta's temples tug down just slightly, and her eyes flash to Albert. "It's not that simple," she says. She stands up from the edge of the bed, then holds her hand out to me. "Let us show you Dreamtown. It'll help you understand." Chapter 13. Together, the three of us leave the house. A rag doll and the governors of Dreamtown, who might be my parents. See, I'm thinking maybe they're from Halloween Town already, and maybe they, usurped the Sandman or something, because they don't match the town at all. Anyway, Albert and Greta still wearing their long robes and silky dark blue pajamas, common attire in Dreamtown, and the sky is the same moody twilight hue as when I first arrived. The moon is full and lazy and low. "Does the sun never rise here?" I ask. "My goodness, no," Albert replies, touching the gray stubble on his chin, the 5 o'clock shadow that I suspect is always there. Can drag dolls get beards? Anyway, unless he was stitched with it. It would be too difficult to fall asleep if the sun was up. This is the perfect quality of light for rest. He waves a hand towards the skyline, at the faint dotting of stars just beginning to poke out. Give me the appearance, oh my god, the appearance of fabric with tiny needle holes allowing the light to shimmer through. And he's right. It does cast a dreamy, drowsy light over everything, always beckoning you into sleep. Like it would take no effort at all. A person could drift off while still standing upright. Why is it that I can understand you both, but everyone else talks in circles? I ask. Albert laughs. You used to talk in riddles, too. You know, when you were younger. It's good practice. For what? Our role in Dreamtown is to help children. And even adults sometimes fall asleep. We whisper bedtime stories and poems into their ears, easing them into slumber. Albert looks over at me, cheeks rosy along the seams of his fabric skin, gray speckled hair cut short, a man I can almost recall reading books to me at night, letting me turn the pages with my small ragdoll hands. Or maybe I just want to believe it, imagine a life where he could have been my father, with his gentle eyes and peppermint candies in his pockets, my favorite mint tea before bed, and his hair that smelled a little of tobacco. Ew! A father who loved me, taught me about dreams and riddles, and didn't lock me in a basement with a cruel upturned snarl. You get used to it after a while, talking in riddles, understanding one another. It's become our common language here. Albert smiles at Greta, a shared knowing between them, a hint of joy that I suspect has been lost all these years, that their only daughter has been missing. But again, I push the thought down, still struggling to make sense of it all, that I could be from this place, that I am nothing like what I used to think I was. We can still talk in the old flat language when we have to, he goes on. When we heard here there was someone in town asking questions using the flat language, we had no idea it was you. He wipes quickly at his eyes so I won't see the tears. We walk past a row of tiny cottages, smoke spilling from the chimneys, the scent of lavender and sage cookies drifting on the evening air. I breathe it in, letting the sweet scent settle into my soft, stitched bones. Make up your mind. Letting it remind me of what might have been. How this place could have made me something different. A girl who baked sweets by the evening light, instead of stirring poisons to escape a man who kept me prisoner. I feel a heaviness in my chest, the burden of too many memories that don't quite fit, before the sting of tears can push against my eyelids. But before the sting of tears can push against my eyelids, the ground beneath us suddenly begins to shake, jolting my focus back. The vibration rattles the cottage windows, and my legs wobble at the knees. What's happening? I ask, eyes darting to the ground and up at the sky. Greta grabs my arm, pulling me into a shop doorway, where the window displays long sleeping caps of various sizes and striped, speckled patterns. Caps for children with unicorns and multicolored rainbows woven into the fabric, others with simple muted grays with delicate embroidered stars and moons like the ones Greta and Albert wear. While Greta and I are huddled in the doorway, Albert stays at the edge of the sidewalk, a hand shading his eyes as he gazes up the cobblestone street, waiting for something. A second passes, the clamoring, crushing sound grows louder, and then a sudden rush of white appears. It takes my eyes a moment to distinguish what's happening, to separate the blur of coiled, white, woolly fur clodding the street. Sheep. I see the 3 dozen at least, thundering up the street towards this town center, hooves pounding against the cobblestones, hot air gusting from their nostrils. Dust swirls up from the street, and I squint my eyes closed against the grit, listening to the rumble of their feet echo along the buildings, the crush of at least 100 sheep all pushed together until the last of the herd races past, and Greta releases my arm. I let out a breath, wiping at my eyes, and step back into the sidewalk. They run amok when they're in Dreamtown, Albert remarks, scratching the back of his head. A nuisance, really. Counting sheep only behave properly when they're in the human world. This herd is still in training. Tufts of white wool lie scattered across the street, dirty hoof prints on the cobblestones, and the air is still has a thick, musty smell, like mothballs or damp wool sweater left to dry on the clothesline. Up the street from where they came runs a girl in a nightgown, long black braids bouncing over her shoulders, holding a shepherd's staff, just like the guards at the front gate, and in front of the Lullaby Library, except hers is meant to actually herd sheep. "Sorry, governors," she says as she passes by, tipping her head at him. "I promise they're getting better." They both smile at the girl, an easy kindness in their eyes. "Just keep them out of the streets, will you?" Albert calls after her. She nods as she hurries along after the stomping, snorting herd. When she's out of sight, I turn to face Greta. "How long have you been the governors of Dreamtown?" Her eyes seem to shimmer, a starry, half-caught in a daydream expression. "Nearly 100 years, she says gently. "We had hoped you would take over the role once we were too tired to carry on, but then you were gone, and—" Her voice trails away, and I try to imagine the hurt and grief they must have felt all those years ago, suddenly childless. It must have been the worst kind of ache, a hole inside them that was impossible to fill. Sorry. But Greta touches my hand, smiling softly, and we continue up the street. I'm putting myself to sleep. They take me through a community garden where valerian and night jasmine are blooming wild and fragrant in neat little rows. Greta squeezes my hand, and I know this must be the garden of my childhood, where I tottered among the plants, learning the names of herbs and the best time to harvest rose petals, where I must have found my love for things that grow from the soil. Just beyond the garden is a wood structure that I think is just a large potting shed or a greenhouse, but they tell me it's a research center where Dreamtown scientists study sleepwalkers, trying to sort out the best way to coax them back to their beds. In a fenced side yard next to the building, several pajama-wearing townspeople are walking around aimlessly, bumping into the low fence, trying to pick up imaginary objects, while two others hold clipboards, scribbling notes and tapping their chins. Excuse me. Everything in Dreamtown, it seems, is about the study or encouragement of sleep. We continue on, making our way toward the town center, when the hoot of an owl echoes long and lazy through the trees. Several residents walking nearby glance to their wrists, checking their timepieces. The clock owl marks every hour in Dreamtown, Albert remarks. It's how we keep track of time. It's a real owl? I ask. Of course. He's a white snowy owl, and he perches atop the Lullaby Library, the tallest building in Dreamtown, to ensure he can be heard at the farthest ends of town. A man and a woman walk past us, wool-knitted scarves wrapped around their necks, matching the fuzzy slippers on their feet. Governors, they say, nodding at Greta and Albert with genial smiles. You're the only rag dolls I've seen in Dreamtown, I comment, seeing myself reflected back in the features of their faces, something I've never known until now. The seams of Albert's mouth lift into a half smile. There are others, rag dolls like us, and also several teddy bears and floppy-eared rabbits. Oh, okay. They are all sleep weavers, but they spend most of their time in the human world, helping lull children to sleep. With so many time zones in the human world, there are always children sleeping somewhere, Greta explains, so we work around the clock, napping when we can. She looks at me again, like she's looking for the girl I used to be, or the girl I might have been if I had stayed in Dreamtown, grown up within its walls. I would already know these things, she explains to me now. I might have even been in line to become the governor. But still, it's difficult for me to imagine any of it, to picture a life other than the one I had, to imagine a life where I never would have met Jack. I clear my throat, thinking of him asleep in our room, Zero nervously hovering by his side, keeping hidden, out of sight, while the Sandman moves through our town. I can't waste any more time. I need you to tell me about the Sandman, I say bluntly. Where is he? How do I stop him? Greta's smile fades from her eyes, her gaze skipping to Albert. Then she nods and pats my hand. We'll show you. She and Albert lead me down a darkened street without candlelight, shadows sunk into every corner, to a stone building set at the edge of town. It's a rather plain structure, gray walls and a gray roof, without windows or a sign announcing its purpose. What is it? I ask. This is our Dream Sand Factory, Albert says, peering up at the 2-story building. Greta keeps my hand in hers, like she won't let me go, not for anything. Dream sand is made here, proprietary, that's what I said. A proprietary blend of stardust, moonbeams, and a pinch of yawns from the yawning tree that grows just outside the town beyond the peak bog. But you must never be sure to venture too close to the yawning tree without proper protective wear, Albert interjects, lifting his stitched eyebrow. The pale blue pollen is very potent and can cause uncontrollable yawning. And hearing him say the word yawn causes a series of large yawns to escape my throat, unbidden. And I think of all the sand I saw in Halloween Town, even the other holidays, how it dusted the sleeping bodies of everyone I found. It was made here, in this factory, in Dreamtown, and just like at the gate and the library, 2 guards are posted at the front door, both looking a tad sleepy. One of them even rubs his eyes and leans against the long shepherd's staff at his side. You have to guard the factory? I ask, my mind churning back to the feeling of dream sand when it touched my skin, when the Sandman sent a swirling cloud of it into our bedroom. How it dusted everything, caught in my hair and under my fingernails. Greta nods. We have to protect it. From who? My voice cracks, already knowing the answer. Greta and Albert exchange a quick look. The Sandman, Greta answers softly, keeping her voice low so no one on the street will hear. I swallow and my pulse begins to race, the pieces starting to link together. The front gate of the town had 2 guards out front, too. Yes. Greta's eyes are cold, seams along her neck tugged impossibly tight. We only open the gate for a few hours every day so our farmers can harvest lavender crops. We keep it closed for the rest of the time, and locked. If I had arrived through the grove of trees at any other time, when the gate was closed, I might still be out there, on the other side of the wall. You keep it closed because of the Sandman, I say, beginning to understand. You want to keep him out of the town. We didn't have a wall in Halloween Town to protect ourselves. We didn't know we should be afraid of things that might slither through open doorways. The Sandman is in my town, I say, my voice like glass wanting to shatter. I need your help. Greta's mouth goes tight, breathing low, and she nods. Come, she says. It's time we take you to the library. The Lullaby Library casts a long moonlit shadow over the town square, pale and watery. At the wide double doors, we step past the 2 guards and are enveloped by the echoey expanse of the library, a massive space that stands 3 doors high, with 4 winding staircases in each corner, and a walkway rimming the floors above us. Every wall is lined with bookshelves, and dozens of couches and settees are scattered through the main floor. The entire library is lit purely by candlelight, giving it a shimmery, lost in a labyrinth of books quality. Okay. Jack would have loved this library. I can imagine him meandering through the rows of books, long bony fingers touching the spines of each tome, eyes gleaming with fascination. I feel a pang at the thought, worried that if I can't find a way to wake him, he might never travel to another realm again. He'll never weave his fingers through mine and recite poems from long-lost books or kiss me in the dark corners of the library like this one. Greta and Albert lead me across the main floor, where several writers are perched on couches, while others doze quietly with notebooks fanned open in their laps, inky pen marks on their fingertips. We reach the middle of the library, and I breathe in the heady scent of old paper. This is the heart of Dreamtown, Greta explains, her eyes skipping around the library. Our poets write hundreds of lullabies a year in this room, songs and stories and riddles to help children fall asleep. Your father even wrote the first theories about daytime dreaming in this library. She smiles at Albert, a look of pride. He invented daydreams, you know. She says, looking back at me, a way for humans to dream up wild, unthinkable things right in the middle of the afternoon, without ever needing to go to sleep. I think back to my own daydreams, moments when I'd managed to lose myself in thought, especially in my old life, dreaming of a future with Jack, dreaming of who I might be if I ever escaped Dr. Finkelstein. Albert's eyes crinkle at the corners, like he's embarrassed, and I try to picture him when he was younger, his now graying hair once a dark brown, seams taut and smooth, hunched over a notebook, conjuring up new ideas for Dreamtown. The Sandman was humming lullabies in my town, I say, eyes wide, trying to lure me out. Greta's mouth tightens into a grimace. We use lullabies to help children drift off to sleep, but the Sandman uses them for something else. She pulls in her bottom lip, like she knows, at last, she must tell me everything, but the words are bitter in her throat. Long ago, the Sandman was the king of our world, but he was not the kind, benevolent man that the folk tales would have you to believe. She moves to a small table stacked with old dusty books, touching the spine of one with her fingertips, the cover all black with no letters on the front. At first, her eyes seem soft, the book unimportant, but then she begins thumbing through the pages until she finds the one she's looking for. She glances back at me, gesturing towards the book. When I peer over her shoulder, a chill slithers down my too tight seams. Sketched onto the open page is a roughly drawn image of a white-robed, gray-bearded man, the Sandman. Is this who you saw in your town? Greta asks. A stiffness formed in my throat, but I nod. She closes the book quietly, letting her fabric palm linger on the cover. The Sandman was a stealer of dreams. She speaks softly now, so her voice won't carry across the rows of books. He would slip into the human world and put children to sleep so he could take their dreams. In the old times, children rarely had dreams, because the Sandman stole them as soon as they drifted off to sleep. Albert shakes his head, a line of tension running down his jaw, his hands sunk into the pockets of his robe. He was cruel and greedy, and we had to increase the production of dream sand just to keep up. He stole millions of dreams every night. Albert draws in a long breath, as though the words are hard to say. We worked night and day, double shifts, and we barely slept. The poets were forced to write lullabies until their fingers bled, until their eyes turned swollen and red, and they could barely see by candlelight. It was a dark time in Dreamtown, Greta says, touching Albert's arm, a gentle, consoling gesture, her eyes soft at the corners. This lasted for centuries, until a group of us began talking in secret when the Sandman was away in the human world. I knew it! They did overthrow him, but they weren't from Halloween Town. They're just stuffed animals. We knew we had to stop him, Albert adds, a grit in his voice. Someone stands up at the far end of the library, stretches their arms over their head, then walks slowly towards the doors, footsteps echoing up the high walls of the library. Greta clears her throat, swallows, then starts again. Once a night, when the Sandman was in the human world stealing dreams, we began building the wall. We closed the dream sand factory for the night. The writers stopped writing sonnets, the farmers came in from the fields, and we all worked together to build a tall stone fortress that encased the entire town. She brushes away a strand of her long red hair, and I notice a stray thread on her wrist, just like mine, a nervous habit we both share. And I wonder, has the loose thread grown more frayed over the years? The worry she felt for her missing daughter, revealed in her unmended seams? Before the Sandman returned, we closed the gates, locking him out of Dreamtown. I feel the leaves in my chest, stirring, imagining how frightened they must have been. We banished him into the woods outside of town, she continues, exhaling, and that's where he stayed all these years. Someone a few tables away snores loudly, muttering in his sleep, before another rider with curly ash-white hair and a moss-green cap elbows him in the shoulder, and the snoring man jerks awake, wiping at his eyes. Afterward, the town decided no more kings or queens, and our people elected... Afterward, the town decided no more kings or queens, and our people elected your mother and me to the official governors of Dreamtown. Albert's eyes stray up to the hovering levels of books above us. The library so tall, so expansive, it makes me dizzy each time I tilt my head upward. He's tried to break through the wall several times, hungry for dreams, but we managed to keep him out all this time, doomed to wander the forest beyond town. Albert clears his throat, swallows, until the doorway into your world was opened, and he gave him a way out, or rather, a way into somewhere else. I flinch, knowing that I was the one who opened the door, the guilt resurfacing again. I remember when I first saw the Sandman, slinking through the shadows, checking those he's already put to sleep, sweeping through every alley in the dark corner of town. In Halloween Town, the Sandman was floating, I say, bringing my focus back. He drifted into our bedroom window and blew sand into our room. Couldn't he simply float over the wall? Greta picks at the loose thread at her wrist, again fidgeting. He can only drift up so high, 20 feet at most, before he's too weighed down from all the sand in his pockets. What about the farmers? I ask. Couldn't he put them to sleep and take their dreams when they're out in the fields? We are residents of Dreamtown, Albert says, speaking softly. We sleep, certainly. In fact, it's our favorite pastime. But dream sand doesn't work on us, so the Sandman cannot put us to sleep and seal our dreams. A jolt runs through me, remembering back to when I tried to wake Jack, when the Sandman blew a cloud of sand through the open windows, coating the floor, my hair, and the hem of my dress. But I didn't fall asleep. I touched the sand and wiped it away, but felt no tug into slumber. I'd assumed I'd been lucky, or maybe it just hadn't been enough to knock me unconscious. Now I know why. Now I understand why. Now I see the truth. I am from Dreamtown. Dream sand has no effect on me, because I was born within the borders of this world. I am a girl who was born, not made. Heat swarms behind my eyes, and all at once I know it's true. Greta and Albert are my parents, and I am their daughter. This is my home. I want to tumble forward into their arms, feel the relief of them against my cotton and linen fabric just like theirs. But my mind won't let me. It tugs back to Jack and Zero and the others. It's even worse than I thought. They aren't simply asleep, rather lost in a dark, dreamless nothing. The Sandman has ripped their dreams away and taken them for himself. They are, in every way that matters, dead. We have to stop him, I say quickly, leaves clawing up into my throat, the panic rushing over me now. It's no longer simply about saving the other holidays, or even Jack. We have to prevent the Sandman from venturing into the human world and putting everyone in every town and city and province into sleep. We have to stop him from stealing more dreams before everyone, everywhere, is asleep. The owl suddenly hoots again from atop the library, marking that another hour has passed. His cries echo through the tall chamber of the library 12 times. 12 hoots before it falls quiet. It's noon, Greta says, as if she senses the slipping of time, the urgency of what must be done. Please, I say, we need to go to Halloween Town. We need to bring the Sandman back here to Dreamtown where he belongs. My mother lets out a deep breath. Mother. The word already feels easier in my mind, like it's been planted back where it belongs. Fit perfectly into place. My father's eyes lower. I'm sorry, Sally, my mother says at last. Your father and I have already decided what needs to be done. What do you mean? The Sandman is in your world, in Halloween Town. This is our chance to keep him from ever coming back here. I shake my head. How? Her eyes glimmer with unshed tears. But when she speaks, her voice is firm and true. We're going to destroy our grove of trees. We're going to ensure he can't ever come back to Dreamtown again. Oh no! They're gonna destroy the trees because, we matter most. Well, on that note, I'm gonna leave it here for now because I really need a nap. And I need to be a bit more rested for my Halloween stream tonight of Resident Evil 2. And we'll continue this foray and see how Sally has to fight her parents or whatever to save her boyfriend in the next time. But until then, have a good evening. And ciao, Bellas.